The woman with raven-black hair and eyes like flintstone walked into Keeler, California with the grace of a mountain lion, and every man on Main Street reached for his gun. It was August 1876, and the desert heat shimmered off the alkali flats surrounding the silver mining town, making the whole world look like a fever dream. The men outside the saloon stopped their card game mid-deal, watching as she moved through the dust with moccasined feet that made no sound. Her dress was a strange hybrid, calico fabric cut in the traditional style, but adorned with intricate beadwork that caught the afternoon sun. A knife hung from her belt in a beaded sheath, and her hands stayed loose at her sides in a way that suggested she knew exactly how to use it. "Dear God," whispered the banker, Chester Morrison, his face going pale beneath his considerable sunburn. "That's Calista Grey. I heard stories, but I never thought I'd see her with my own eyes." "She was raised by them savages up in the mountains," another man hissed, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "After her folks died when she was just a little thing. Apaches took her in, or maybe Paiutes. I heard different stories. Either way, she's more Indian than white now, dangerous as a rattlesnake." "She's savage," the third man said, his hand trembling on his holster. "Pure savage. Look at the way she walks, like she's hunting us." Calista heard every word, though she gave no indication. Her eyes scanned the street with the careful attention of someone who had learned young that carelessness meant death. She had come down from the Sierra Nevada for the first time in 6 years, not because she wanted to, but because the medicine woman who had raised her needed supplies that could only be bought with silver coins in a white man's town. The journey had taken her 3 days on foot, following game trails that most men would never find. The general store was her destination, but she had barely taken 5 steps toward it when 3 men blocked her path. They wore the look of troublemakers, the kind who found courage in numbers and whiskey. "Well, well," the largest one said, his breath already reeking of alcohol despite the early hour. "Look what wandered down from the hills. You lost, squaw?" Callista's expression did not change. She had learned long ago that showing fear was the fastest way to invite attack, whether from animals or men. "Move," she said simply, her English perfect, but accented with the rhythmic cadence of the Paiute tongue. "Oh, she speaks," the man laughed, looking to his companions for approval. "But she don't say please. Maybe we need to teach her some manners. What do you think, boys?" Before any of them could move closer, a voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "I think you boys need to find somewhere else to be." The speaker was the largest man Calista had ever seen, and she had seen grizzly bears stand upright at 9 feet tall. He was at least 6.5 feet of solid muscle, with shoulders that seemed to fill the entire width of the boardwalk. His hair was dark brown and fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and his face was weathered by wind and sun until it looked carved from the same granite as the mountains. His arms, bare beneath a rolled-up workshirt, showed muscles that rippled with even the slightest movement. He wore buckskin trousers and heavy boots, and across his back was a rifle that looked well used but meticulously maintained. "This ain't your business, Samuel," the drunk said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Samuel Ironwood, Calista thought, recognizing the name immediately. The mountain man was a legend even among her adopted people. They called him "He Who Walks with Bears," because he had once killed a grizzly with nothing but a knife when it had attacked a Paiute hunting party. He had lived in the high country for more than a decade, trapping and hunting, occasionally coming down to trade furs and get supplies. The Paiute respected him because he respected the land and kept his word, 2 things that white men rarely did in their experience. Samuel took a step forward, and the sheer physical presence of him made all 3 men back up. "I'm making it my business, Henderson. Now move along before you do something that'll make your wife a widow." Henderson wanted to argue. Calista could see it in his eyes, but self-preservation won out over pride. The 3 men shuffled away, muttering curses that they made sure were too quiet to clearly hear. Samuel turned to Calista, and his eyes, which had been hard as stone a moment before, softened slightly. They were gray, like storm clouds over the mountains. "You all right, miss?" "I do not need protection," Calista said, her chin lifting slightly, "but I thank you for your intervention." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, barely visible beneath his beard. No, I don't suppose you do. Saw you handle yourself against a pack of wolves last spring, up near Lone Pine Creek. You didn't see me, but I was tracking a cougar and came across you. You moved like water, smooth and certain. It was something to see. Calista studied him with renewed interest. Most white men looked at her with either fear or lust, sometimes both. Samuel Ironwood looked at her with respect, the same way a hunter respects another hunter. You did not help me then. You didn't need it then either, he said simply. But down here it's different. These folks see you, and all they see is their own fear looking back at them. Makes them dangerous in a different way than wolves. And what do you see when you look at me? The question came out before Calista could stop it, and she immediately regretted showing even that much curiosity. Samuel was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes holding hers. I see someone who knows how to survive, how to really live, not just exist. That's rarer than silver in these parts. Before Calista could respond, the general store owner appeared in his doorway. Samuel, good to see you. I got those traps you ordered, and miss, he paused, clearly uncertain how to address her. If you need supplies, I run an honest business. Don't pay no mind to the fools in the street. The store owner, Marcus Webb, was one of the few men in Keeler who had dealt with the Paiute fairly. Calista's adopted grandmother, Silver Fawn, had told her this, which was why she had made the long journey to this particular town rather than one of the others scattered across the desert. I need medicine supplies, Calista said, pulling a small leather pouch from her belt. Inside were silver nuggets, found in a stream over many months of patient searching. Willow bark honey, clean cloth for bandages, needle and thread, and whiskey for cleaning wounds. Marcus nodded approvingly. You know your medicine. That'll be about $3 worth. Let me get those items together for you. Samuel had followed them into the store, moving with surprising quiet for such a large man. As Marcus gathered the supplies, he spoke again. You came a long way for these things. The Paiute camps are 3 days north of here, if you're coming from where I think you are. Silver Fawn needs them, Calista said simply. She raised me after my parents died. I was 7 winters old when the fever took them. They were missionaries, foolish enough to think they could cross the desert in summer with insufficient water. Silver Fawn found me sitting between their graves, half dead from thirst. She carried me to her people and nursed me back to life. I owe her everything. Silver Fawn, Samuel repeated, his expression showing recognition. The medicine woman. She healed my leg 2 years back when I took a fall from a cliff face. Wouldn't take any payment except that I help with the firewood for winter. She's a good woman. The best I have known, Calista agreed. There was something strange happening in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the desert heat. She had spoken more to this man in 5 minutes than she had to any white person in years. His presence was oddly comforting, like standing near a fire on a cold night. Marcus returned with the supplies wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. $3 even, miss. Calista counted out the silver carefully, aware that many shopkeepers tried to cheat Indians, but Marcus's scale was honest, and he gave her a small piece of peppermint candy as extra. For your journey back. Thank you, she said, meaning it. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent toward the Inyo Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Calista knew she should start walking immediately if she wanted to make it to her first camping spot before full dark, but something made her hesitate. You're heading back tonight? Samuel asked, stepping out behind her. Yes. I cannot leave Silver Fawn alone for too long. She is strong, but she has seen 80 winters. The desert at night is no place to travel alone, he said, and before she could protest, he held up a hand. I know you can handle yourself, but I'm heading that direction anyway. Been meaning to visit Silver Fawn, thank her properly for healing me. Maybe bring her some of the elk jerky I made last week. She seemed to enjoy it last time. Calista wanted to refuse, but practicality won out over pride. 2 sets of eyes were better than one, and if they encountered trouble, Samuel Ironwood was the kind of man you wanted at your side. You may travel with me, she said, making it sound like she was granting permission rather than accepting help. That almost smile appeared again. Appreciated, miss. Calista, she said, if we are to travel together, you may use my name. Calista, he repeated, and the way he said it made something flutter in her stomach like bird wings. Beautiful name. Means most beautiful in Greek, if I remember my schooling right. My mother chose it, Calista said softly. I remember very little of her, but I remember her singing to me and telling me I was her beautiful gift from God. They walked in comfortable silence out of Keeler, heading northeast toward the mountains. Once they were beyond sight of the town, Calista moved off the main trail onto a smaller path that wound between Joshua trees and scrub brush. Samuel followed without question, trusting her knowledge of the land. "You move different out here," he observed after an hour of walking. "In town you were all coiled up tight, ready to strike. Out here you're like water flowing downhill, natural and easy." "The town is full of fear," Calista said. "Fear makes people cruel. The land is honest. It might kill you, but it will not pretend to be your friend while doing so." "That's the truth," Samuel agreed. "I left civilization 12 years ago after my pa died. Couldn't stand the crowded cities, everyone climbing over each other for money and power. The mountains called to me, promised freedom and clean air. Haven't regretted it for a single day." "Except when you fell off a cliff," Calista pointed out, and was surprised to hear something like humor in her own voice. Samuel laughed, a deep, rich sound that seemed to roll across the desert like thunder. "Fair point. That was a rough week. Busted my leg in 2 places and lay there for half a day before I could drag myself to water. Took me 3 days to crawl to the Paiute camp. Silver Fawn took one look at me and started ordering everyone around in a way that reminded me of my ma. Set the bones, made some kind of poultice that drew out the infection, and force-fed me bitter tea 3 times a day. Willow bark and yarrow," Calista said, "for pain and healing. Worked like a charm. Within 6 weeks I was walking again, another 2 months and I was back to normal. Would have lost the leg with a white doctor or likely died of infection." The sun set in spectacular fashion, and Calista led them to a small canyon she knew had a reliable spring. As they made camp, they fell into an easy rhythm, each handling their tasks without need for discussion. Samuel built a small fire, while Calista filled their canteens and checked the area for scorpions. They ate jerky and hardtack, sharing the water without hesitation. "Can I ask you something?" Samuel said as the stars began to appear overhead in their thousands. "You may ask. I may not answer." "Fair enough. Why did the town folks get so riled up seeing you? I've seen Paiute come through before, and while some folks are wary, it's never like that." Calista was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "Because I am both and neither. To the white people, I am a traitor to my race, someone who chose the savage life. To some of the people, I am forever an outsider, white skin playing at being Paiute. I walk between 2 worlds and belong to none." "That's lonely," Samuel said softly. "Yes," Calista admitted. "It is." "For what it's worth," he said, meeting her eyes across the fire. "You seem to belong to the mountains, same as me. Maybe that's its own tribe, those of us who fit better with rocks and trees than people." Something in Callista's chest loosened, a knot she hadn't known was there. "Perhaps," she said. "I have never thought of it that way." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their lives in the high country. Samuel told her about the time he accidentally got between a mother bear and her cubs and had to climb a tree and wait 6 hours until she decided he wasn't a threat. Calista told him about learning to track from Silver Fawn's son, White Eagle, who had taught her to read stories in disturbed grass and broken twigs that were invisible to untrained eyes. When they finally settled down to sleep, with Samuel on one side of the fire and Calista on the other, she felt safer than she had in years, not because she needed protection, but because for the first time since leaving her adopted family's camp, she didn't feel utterly alone. They rose before dawn and made good time, reaching the Paiute camp by mid-afternoon of the 2nd day. The camp was situated in a protected valley, where a clear stream provided water year-round, and pine trees offered shade and building materials. A dozen or so wickiups made from willow branches and tool mats dotted the area, along with drying racks for meat and fish. Children spotted them first and came running, shouting greetings. The adults emerged more slowly, their faces breaking into smiles when they recognized Calista and Samuel. White Eagle, Silver Fawn's son and the camp leader, clasped arms with Samuel in the traditional greeting. "He who walks with bears," White Eagle said warmly, "you honor us with your presence." "The honor is mine," Samuel replied in careful Paiute, the words heavily accented but respectful. Silver Fawn emerged from her wickiup, leaning heavily on a walking stick, but with eyes still sharp and bright. She took one look at Calista and Samuel standing together, and something like satisfaction crossed her weathered face. "Granddaughter," she said, opening her arms. Calista went to her, embracing the old woman carefully. "I brought the medicines you needed." "Good, good," Silver Fawn said, then looked at Samuel. "And you brought something else as well, I see." "Silver Fawn," Samuel said, bowing his head respectfully, "I brought you elk jerky and my thanks, which I don't think I gave properly before." The old woman laughed, a sound like dried leaves rustling. "Come, both of you, eat with us. We have much to talk about." The camp welcomed them with the generous hospitality that was customary among the Paiute. A fire was built up and food was shared freely, rabbit stew and pine nut cakes and fresh trout from the stream. Calista found herself sitting beside Samuel, their shoulders almost touching, and she was acutely aware of his presence in a way that was both unsettling and pleasant. After the meal, Silver Fawn gestured for Calista and Samuel to follow her to her wickiup. Inside, dried herbs hung from the framework and clay pots lined the walls, creating a space that smelled of sage and medicine. "Sit," the old woman commanded, and they obeyed. Silver Fawn studied them both with eyes that seemed to see far more than surface appearances. "When I found you, little one," she said to Calista, "you were like a wounded bird, all broken wings and frightened eyes. I knew the spirits had brought you to me for a reason. I taught you our ways, but I never wanted you to forget your own. You are a bridge between worlds, whether you see it or not." "The people in the town," Calista started to say, but Silver Fawn waved her hand dismissively. "Fools! They fear what they do not understand." "But you," she turned to Samuel, "you understand, don't you? You see what she is, not what she looks like." Samuel held the old woman's gaze steadily. "I see someone wise beyond her years, someone who knows how to live in harmony with the land, someone brave enough to walk alone when she has to." "And," Silver Fawn prompted, a knowing smile on her lips. "And the most fascinating woman I've ever met," Samuel admitted, glancing at Calista. "Smart and strong and so beautiful it makes my chest hurt to look at her sometimes." Calista felt her face heat up, a blush darkening her cheeks. No one had ever spoken of her that way. The young men of the tribe respected her but kept their distance, knowing she was different. White men either feared or desired her in ways that made her uncomfortable. But Samuel's words carried no threat, only honesty. "I see," Silver Fawn said, clearly delighted. "And you, granddaughter, what do you think of this bear of a man?" Calista struggled to find words. "He is kind and strong. He does not look at me with fear." "Is that all?" the old woman pushed. Taking a breath, Calista met Samuel's eyes. "When I am near him, I feel less alone. Like perhaps I do belong somewhere after all." Silver Fawn clapped her hands together. "Good, very good. Now listen to me, both of you. I am old and I have seen many seasons pass. I have learned that when the spirits bring two people together, when they fit like two halves of the same whole, you do not question it. You accept the gift." "Are you saying," Samuel started, then paused, "Madam, I have great respect for Calista, but I won't presume anything. She's free to make her own choices." "Of course she is," Silver Fawn said impatiently, "but sometimes people need someone to tell them what their hearts already know. You two are meant to walk the same path. The question is whether you're both wise enough to see it." After leaving Silver Fawn's wickiup, Calista and Samuel walked together to the stream. The evening was cooling down, and the water sang over smooth stones in a soothing melody. "She's not subtle, is she?" Samuel said with a rueful smile. "Never has been," Calista agreed, "but she is rarely wrong." They stood side by side, watching the water flow past. Finally, Samuel spoke. "Calista, I won't lie to you. From the moment I saw you move through that wolf pack last spring, you've been in my thoughts. I told myself I was a fool, that you probably wanted nothing to do with a rough mountain man. But then today happened, and Silver Fawn said those things, and now I'm wondering if maybe I'm not as big a fool as I thought." Callista's heart was pounding. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted. "I have never... The Paiute boys were like brothers to me. White men have only ever been threats or strangers. You are the first man I have met who feels like neither." "Then maybe we figure it out together," Samuel suggested. "No pressure, no expectations, just two people who enjoy each other's company, seeing where the trail leads." "I would like that," Calista said softly. Then, gathering her courage, she reached out and took his hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and large enough to engulf hers completely. He squeezed gently, and that flutter started up again in her stomach. They stayed by the stream until the stars came out, talking quietly about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about his childhood in Missouri, how his father had been a blacksmith and taught him to respect the strength of well-forged metal. Calista told him about learning to make medicines, how Silver Fawn had taught her to listen to what the plants were telling her. "Stay a few days," Calista said suddenly. "White Eagle will be taking a hunting party out tomorrow. You could go with them, and I could show you the meadow where the best healing herbs grow." "I'd like that very much," Samuel said, and the warmth in his voice matched the warmth of his hand in hers. The next 3 days passed in a way that felt both languorous and too fast. Samuel joined the hunting party and brought down a large mule deer, earning respect from the hunters. Calista showed him her secret herb garden, a hidden meadow where plants thrived in the mountain soil. They talked endlessly, discovering shared opinions on everything from the best way to cure hides to what constellations looked like in winter. On the third evening, they sat together by the stream again, this time with his arm around her shoulders and her head resting against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and it made her feel anchored in a way she never had before. "I have to ask you something," Samuel said, his voice rumbling through his chest, "and I want you to be completely honest, even if you think I won't like the answer." "All right," Calista said, tensing slightly. "Do you ever want to leave the mountains? Live in a town or city, have a normal life?" Calista sat up so she could look at him properly. "Never. The mountains are my home. The freedom of the wilderness is in my blood now. I could not live trapped between walls, surrounded by people who fear difference." She paused. "Why do you ask? Are you thinking of leaving?" "God, no," Samuel said immediately, relief clear in his voice. "I was afraid you might want that someday, that I couldn't give you the kind of life most women want, with a proper house and neighbors and church on Sunday." "I'm not most women," Calista pointed out. "No," Samuel agreed, cupping her face with one large hand. "You're not. You're extraordinary." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, almost tentative. Then something ignited between them, and the kiss deepened. Calista had never been kissed before, but her body seemed to know what to do, responding to him in ways that made heat pool low in her belly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "Calista Grey, I think I'm falling in love with you." "I think I'm falling in love with you too, Samuel Ironwood," she whispered back. "It frightens me. I've never felt this way before." "Me neither," he admitted. "Not like this. This feels like standing on a cliff edge, knowing you're about to jump." "Will you catch me?" Calista asked. "Every time," he promised. "Every single time." They stayed with the tribe for another week, and during that time their relationship deepened. Silver Fawn watched with obvious satisfaction, while White Eagle and the other members of the tribe accepted Samuel's presence with easy welcome. He was already known as a friend to their people, and seeing him with Calista seemed right to them, as natural as the seasons changing. Finally, the time came when Samuel needed to check his trap lines and return to his cabin. It was located another 2 days north, in a valley protected by high peaks where he had built a solid structure from pine logs. "Come with me," he said to Calista as they prepared to leave. "See where I live. If you don't like it, if it doesn't feel right, then we'll figure something else out. But I want you to see it." Calista looked at Silver Fawn, who nodded encouragingly. "Go, child. See what life he offers. You can always come back here, but I think you will find that home is not a place anymore. Home is where your heart is, and I think your heart is walking north with that bear of a man." The journey to Samuel's cabin took them through some of the most beautiful country Calista had ever seen. They climbed higher into the Sierra Nevada, following trails that only someone intimate with the land would know. Samuel pointed out landmarks as they went, showed her where the best fishing holes were, where the eagles nested, where mountain sheep came to lick salt from exposed rock. "I built the cabin 6 years ago," he explained as they walked. "Took me most of a summer to cut and haul all the logs, but I wanted it done right. It's not fancy, but it's solid and warm in winter." When they finally arrived, Calista stopped in her tracks and stared. The cabin sat beside a pristine mountain lake, its waters so clear you could see straight to the bottom 20 feet down. Pine and fir trees surrounded the area, and a meadow full of wildflowers stretched out on one side. The cabin itself was beautifully crafted, with tight joints and a sturdy stone chimney. A covered porch ran along the front, and she could see stacks of firewood neatly arranged under the overhang. "Samuel," she breathed, "it's perfect." He grinned, looking pleased and slightly embarrassed. "You really think so? It's pretty rough compared to a real house." "It is better than any house," Calista said firmly. "It fits the land. It does not try to conquer or control, just exists in harmony." Inside, the single room was neat and well organized. A large bed took up one corner, covered with fur blankets that looked thick and warm. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with cooking implements hung tidily nearby. Shelves held supplies and books, more books than Calista had seen since her parents died. A table and 2 chairs sat by the window, and the floor was covered with more furs. "I like to read," Samuel said, seeing her looking at the books. "Helps pass the long winter evenings. I've got everything from Shakespeare to farming manuals, though I can't say I've ever farmed anything." Calista moved to the shelves, running her fingers over the spines reverently. "My mother taught me to read before she died. Silver Fawn encouraged me to keep practicing, but books are rare in the camp. I have missed them." "Then these are yours as much as mine," Samuel said. "Everything I have is yours if you'll have it, if you'll have me." Calista turned to face him, her heart full to bursting. "Are you asking me to stay?" "I'm asking you to marry me," Samuel said, closing the distance between them. "I know it's fast, I know we've only known each other a week, but out here time works different. I know my heart, and my heart says you're the one I've been waiting for. I love you, Calista. I love your strength and your wisdom and the way you see the world. I love how you move like water and think 3 steps ahead. I love everything about you." Tears gathered in Callista's eyes. "I love you too. Yes, I will marry you." He swept her up in his arms, kissing her thoroughly, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the passion she had been holding in check. When he carried her to the bed, she went willingly, ready to start this new chapter of her life. They were married a week later by White Eagle, who performed the traditional Paiute ceremony with Silver Fawn, looking on with tears of joy. The entire tribe celebrated with them, and even Samuel managed to stumble through the traditional words in Paiute, making everyone laugh with his accent, but earning respect for the attempt. "You are now bound together," White Eagle said, tying a cord around their joined hands. "2 souls walking one path. May your journey be long and filled with joy." They spent one more night in the Paiute camp, then returned to Samuel's cabin to begin their life together. The first months were a time of learning and adjustment. Calista taught Samuel more about medicinal plants and showed him tracking techniques he had never mastered. Samuel taught her to shoot his rifle accurately and showed her how to cure pelts properly for maximum value when trading. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, each handling tasks that suited their skills while helping with everything else. In the mornings, they would often sit on the porch together with coffee, watching the sun light up the mountains. In the evenings, Samuel would read aloud while Calista worked on her beading or mended clothes. The physical side of their marriage was a joy and revelation to both of them. Samuel was always gentle with her, patient and caring, making sure she felt cherished. Calista discovered a passion she had never known existed, and their nights together were full of tenderness and heat in equal measure. But their happiness was not without challenges. In late October, Calista and Samuel made a supply run to Keeler. They needed salt, sugar, flour, and a few other items they could not make or find themselves. The moment they rode into town on Samuel's sturdy bay horse, Calista sitting before him with his arms around her, she felt the atmosphere change. The men who had blocked her path in August were there again, and they looked even less friendly. Word had spread that Samuel Ironwood had married the savage girl, and not everyone approved. "Well, look at this," Henderson sneered as they dismounted. "The mighty mountain man brought his squaw to town. That's what you reduced to, Samuel. Couldn't find a decent white woman, so you settled for damaged goods?" Samuel's jaw tightened, and Calista could feel the anger radiating from him. But before he could speak, she put her hand on his arm. "I will handle this," she said quietly. "Calista," Samuel started, but she shook her head. She turned to face Henderson and his companions, her spine straight and her chin high. You call me savage because I was raised by people you consider beneath you. You fear me because I know things you do not, because I can survive in places that would kill you in days. But your fear says more about your weakness than my savagery. Listen to her, one of the other men spat, talking all high and mighty. I have lived in 2 worlds, Calista continued, her voice calm but carrying clearly. I know the Paiute ways and the white ways. I speak 3 languages while you can barely manage one. I can track game across bare rock, make medicines that have saved lives, and survive winters that would freeze you solid. You call this savage. I call it wisdom. Henderson took a threatening step forward. You got a smart mouth for someone who ought to be grateful we don't run you out of town. Touch my wife and you'll regret it, Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. He had not moved, but suddenly he seemed twice as large, all muscle and menace. I've been patient with you, Henderson, because I don't like trouble. But there's a limit to every man's patience, and you're dancing on the edge of mine. A new voice cut into the tension. Seems to me the lady made some good points. Everyone turned to see the town's mayor, a portly man named Douglas Porter, stepping out of his office. He had been watching from his window, and his face showed a mixture of shame and determination. Henderson, you and your boys have been trouble since you arrived in Keeler, Porter continued, starting fights, harassing folks, drinking too much and working too little. This young woman comes to town peacefully, just wanting to buy supplies, and you can't leave well enough alone. But she's a savage, Henderson protested. She just proved she's smarter than you, Porter said flatly. And Samuel Ironwood is a respected man in these parts. He helped rescue my daughter when she got lost in the foothills 2 years back, tracked her through a snowstorm, and brought her home safe. If he says this woman is his wife, then she's his wife, and she deserves respect. Other townspeople had gathered, and Calista was surprised to see several nodding in agreement. Not everyone feared her, she realized. Some were just uncertain, confused by her presence, and some, like Porter, were decent enough to judge people by actions rather than appearances. I don't have to listen to this, Henderson said, but he was backing away now. His friends followed, still muttering but clearly unwilling to push things further. Porter approached Samuel and Calista, extending his hand first to Samuel, then to her. Mrs. Ironwood, I apologize for that display. Please know that you are welcome in Keeler any time. Thank you, Calista said, shaking his hand firmly. Your words mean much. They completed their shopping with Marcus Webb, who was as fair as always. Several other townspeople stopped to offer greetings, including a minister's wife who invited them to dinner next time they came to town. By the time they left, Calista felt something shift inside her. She would never be fully accepted by everyone, but she did not need to be. The good people, the ones worth knowing, would judge her fairly. The others did not matter. On the ride home, Samuel pulled her closer against his chest. You were magnificent, he murmured into her hair. The way you stood up to them, so calm and strong. I wanted to pound Henderson into the dirt, but your way was better. Silver Fawn taught me that words can be more powerful than fists, Calista said, though I am glad you were there. Knowing you stood ready to defend me made me brave. Always, Samuel promised, I'll always stand with you. Winter came to the high country with fury and beauty in equal measure. The first snow fell in early November, blanketing everything in white silence. Samuel had been preparing for months, and the cabin was stocked with enough food and firewood to last until spring. They settled in for the long, quiet months, and Calista discovered that she loved winter in a way she never had before. With Samuel, the isolation was not lonely but cozy. They spent hours in front of the fire, talking and reading and making love. Samuel taught her to play chess using a set carved from pine wood, and she beat him within a month, much to his amused chagrin. She taught him more Paiute until he could carry on a basic conversation without stumbling over the words. Tell me about your parents, Samuel asked one night as they lay in bed, snow falling softly outside. You've mentioned them, but never in detail. Calista was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. My father was a missionary, full of conviction that he was doing God's work. My mother followed him because she loved him, but I think she had doubts. I remember her singing to me, old songs from her childhood in Boston. She was beautiful, with blonde hair and blue eyes. I looked nothing like her. You have her courage, though. Samuel said, stroking her hair. It took courage to follow a man into the wilderness with a child. They were not prepared, Calista said softly. They thought faith would be enough, but faith does not replace water in the desert, does not cool you in the heat. They died within days of each other. I tried to care for them, but I was 7 and knew nothing. I thought I would die too. But Silver Fawn found you, Samuel prompted gently. She was out gathering plants and heard me crying. She said later that the spirits led her to me, that she knew immediately I was meant to be hers. She had lost her own daughter to sickness the year before, and she said I filled the hole in her heart. I'm glad she found you, Samuel said, pulling her closer. If she hadn't, you wouldn't be here now. Sometimes I wonder what my parents would think of me now, Calista admitted, if they would be horrified that I became Paiute, or if they would understand. I think any parent worth the name would be proud of how you survived, how you thrived, Samuel said firmly. You took a tragedy and made a life. That's not something to be ashamed of. Calista kissed him, pouring gratitude and love into the gesture. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. The real me. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly. Just the two of them. Samuel had secretly been carving a set of hairpins from deer antler, decorating them with intricate designs. Calista had made him a new shirt from deerskin, with beadwork across the shoulders that told the story of their meeting and marriage in the symbolic language of the Paiute. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever owned, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion as he examined the intricate work. Calista, this must have taken you months. I started it the day after you proposed, she admitted. I worked on it every moment you were not looking. I wanted you to have something that showed how much you mean to me. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I love you more than words can say. You are my whole world. And you are mine, she whispered back. As winter deepened, they grew closer than ever. The forced closeness of the small cabin could have been stifling, but instead, it created an intimacy that was both emotional and physical. They learned each other's rhythms and moods, knew without words when the other needed space or comfort. In January, a pack of wolves began prowling near the cabin, drawn by the scent of their stored meat. Samuel wanted to go out and drive them off, but Calista stopped him. Wait, she said, let me try something. She went to the door and began to sing, a Paiute song that Silver Fawn had taught her about respect between hunters. Her voice carried clear and strong across the snow, and to Samuel's amazement, the wolves stopped their prowling and sat down, ears pricked forward. Calista continued singing, then spoke to them in Paiute, explaining that this was their home and that there was not enough game to share. After several minutes, the alpha wolf stood, gave a long look at the cabin, and led his pack away into the forest. What did you say to them? Samuel asked, stunned. I told them the truth, that we are hunters like them, that we respect them, but will defend our territory. Sometimes animals understand honesty better than humans do. You are incredible, Samuel said, shaking his head in wonder. Absolutely incredible. February brought the worst storms, with winds that howled like demons and snow that piled up past the windows. But inside the cabin, they were warm and safe. Calista began to notice changes in her body, a tenderness in her breasts and a strange feeling in her belly. At first she said nothing, uncertain, but by the end of the month she was sure. Samuel, she said one evening as they sat by the fire, I need to tell you something. He looked up from the trap he was mending, immediately attentive. What is it? Are you all right? I'm more than all right, Calista said, allowing a smile to break across her face. I'm with child. For a moment, Samuel just stared at her. Then he dropped the trap and crossed to her in 2 long strides, pulling her up into his arms and spinning her around. A baby? We're having a baby? Yes, Calista laughed, clinging to him, unless I am very much mistaken, which I do not think I am. The signs are all there. He set her down carefully, as if she might break, then knelt before her and placed his large hands gently on her still flat stomach. There's a baby in there. Our baby. Are you happy? Calista asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it, Samuel said, looking up at her with eyes that shone with tears. Calista, you've given me everything. A home, love, and now a family. I never thought I'd have this. I thought I'd live and die alone in these mountains. Now you will live and die with a wife who loves you and children who will carry your strength, Calista said, running her fingers through his hair. That is a much better fate, I think. The rest of the winter was spent preparing for the baby. Samuel began building a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it for hours until there was not a single splinter. Calista sewed tiny clothes from the softest deerskin and knitted blankets from wool they had traded for. They talked endlessly about names and what kind of parents they wanted to be. When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and bringing green back to the world, they made the journey to the Paiute camp. Silver Fawn took one look at Calista and let out a whoop of joy. "A baby! I'm to be a great-grandmother!" The tribe celebrated the news with them, and Silver Fawn immediately began instructing Calista on pregnancy and birth in exhaustive detail. She gave her special herbs to take for health and nausea, showed her exercises to do to keep strong, and made her promise to come back to the camp when her time was near. "You will want women around you for the birth," Silver Fawn said firmly. "This is not something a husband can help with, no matter how strong he is." Samuel looked relieved and terrified at the same time. "I'll bring her back 2 weeks before she's due," he promised, "maybe 3 weeks to be safe." Summer passed in a haze of preparation and happiness. Callista's belly grew round and heavy, and she loved watching Samuel talk to it every night, telling their child stories and promises. The baby kicked vigorously, and whenever Samuel put his hand on her stomach to feel it, his face lit up with wonder. "Strong," he would say with pride, "already strong." They made 2 more trips to Keeler for supplies, and each time more people greeted them with respect. Calista had proven herself not savage, but wise, and even some of the initially skeptical townspeople had warmed to her. When they learned she was pregnant, several of the women gave her gifts, hand-sewn baby clothes and blankets, offering congratulations and advice. In September, as the leaves began to turn gold and red, they returned to the Paiute camp. Callista's time was near, and Silver Fawn took over with the confidence of someone who had delivered dozens of babies. Samuel was banished to sit with White Eagle and the other men, where they could do nothing but wait and worry. The labor was long and difficult. Calista had always been strong, but this test pushed her to her limits. Silver Fawn and the other women surrounded her with support and encouragement, but there were moments when she thought she could not continue. "You are a warrior," Silver Fawn told her firmly during a particularly painful contraction. "You have survived things that would break other women. You can do this. Your daughter needs you to be strong." "Daughter?" Calista gasped. Silver Fawn smiled. "I know these things. You carry a girl, strong-willed and fierce like her mother." Hours later, as the sun set and painted the sky orange and red, a baby's cry split the air. Calista collapsed back against the supporting arms of the women, exhausted but filled with indescribable joy. "A girl," Silver Fawn announced, placing the squalling red-faced infant on Callista's chest, perfect and healthy and very angry about being born. Calista looked down at her daughter, at the tiny face and waving fists, and felt love so intense it was almost painful. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mother." Samuel was allowed in moments later, and he came in looking pale and shaken. But when he saw Calista holding their daughter, his entire face transformed. "A girl," Calista said, smiling up at him. "We have a daughter." He knelt beside them, reaching out one enormous finger for the baby to grasp. She did, with surprising strength, and Samuel made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "She's perfect," he said hoarsely. "You're both perfect. God, Calista, you're amazing. I heard you the hours of labor, and I felt so helpless." "It was worth it," Calista said softly, looking down at their daughter. "Every moment was worth it for her." They named her Sarah Iris Ironwood, honoring Samuel's mother and Callista's love of wildflowers. Sarah had dark hair like her mother but gray eyes like her father, and from the beginning she was alert and curious about everything around her. The tribe welcomed Sarah with joy and ceremony. White Eagle blessed her, and Silver Fawn made her a cradle board decorated with protective symbols. For 2 weeks, they stayed in the camp while Calista recovered, and Samuel learned how to care for an infant with patient instruction from the women. When they finally returned to their cabin, it felt like coming home in a new way. Now there were 3 of them, a family in truth. The first months were exhausting, with Sarah waking frequently to nurse and needing constant attention. But Samuel was a devoted father, walking the floor with her for hours when she was fussy, singing to her in his rumbling bass voice, watching over her with fierce protectiveness. "I never knew love could be like this," he told Calista one night as they watched Sarah sleep in her cradle. "I thought what I felt for you was as much as a heart could hold, but somehow there's room for even more." "She is ours," Calista said simply, "made from our love. How could we not love her beyond measure?" The years that followed were full and happy. Sarah grew from infant to toddler to little girl, wild and free as the mountains themselves. She learned to walk by clinging to her father's fingers and took her first steps toward her mother's outstretched arms. She learned to speak in a mixture of English and Paiute, calling Samuel Papa and Calista Mama, but also using the Paiute words that Silver Fawn taught her. When Sarah was 3, Calista became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when her time came, they were at the cabin. Samuel had learned enough from Silver Fawn to assist, and with his strong hands supporting her, Calista delivered a son in the early morning hours of a spring day. "A boy," Samuel said with awe, holding his son for the first time. "We have a son." They named him Seth James Ironwood, and he was as different from Sarah as night from day. Where she was adventurous and bold, he was cautious and thoughtful. But both children were deeply loved, and they grew up knowing they were cherished. The family made regular trips to visit the Paiute camp, and Sarah and Seth were as comfortable there as in their own home. They learned to track and hunt, to identify plants and make medicines. Silver Fawn doted on them shamelessly, telling them stories and teaching them skills. When Sarah was 8 and Seth was 5, tragedy struck. Silver Fawn passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family. The entire tribe mourned, but none more than Calista, who felt like she had lost her mother a second time. "She lived a long and good life," Samuel told her as she wept against his chest, "and she died knowing you were happy with a family of your own. That's all she ever wanted for you." "I know," Calista said, "but knowing does not make the loss hurt less." They buried Silver Fawn in the traditional way, and White Eagle spoke of her wisdom and kindness. Sarah and Seth placed wildflowers on her grave, and Sarah told her great-grandmother that she would remember everything she had taught her. Life continued, as it always does. The children grew, the seasons changed, and Samuel and Callista's love only deepened with time. They faced challenges together, from harsh winters to supply shortages to the occasional run-in with unfriendly people in town. But they always emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. When Sarah was 15, a young man from the Paiute tribe named Running Fox began showing interest in her. Samuel was initially protective to the point of hostility, but Calista gently reminded him that their daughter needed to make her own choices. "She is wise like you," Calista told him. "Trust her judgment." Samuel grumbled but relented, and as it turned out, Running Fox was a good young man, respectful and hard-working. He and Sarah began courting in the traditional way, with Samuel watching like a hawk the entire time. "Was I this obvious when I was courting you?" he asked Calista one evening. "Worse," she said with a smile. "You followed me around like a lovesick bear." "I did not," Samuel protested, then paused. "Did I?" "You did, and it was adorable," Calista said, kissing him soundly. Seth showed no interest in courting yet, preferring to spend his time learning everything he could about the mountains and animals. He had a gift for understanding animal behavior, and Samuel predicted he would be an even better tracker than Calista someday. The years rolled on, bringing change but also continuity. Keeler grew and evolved, and the townspeople who had once feared Calista now respected her. When there was sickness, people sometimes came to her for medicines, knowing she had knowledge that white doctors lacked. She helped everyone who asked, regardless of whether they had treated her well or poorly in the past. "You have a generous heart," Samuel told her after she spent 3 days nursing Henderson's wife through a fever. Henderson himself had apologized for his past behavior, humbled by Callista's willingness to help despite everything. "Holding grudges takes too much energy," Calista said. "Better to let the past be past and focus on the present." When Sarah was 18, she and Running Fox were married in a ceremony that blended Paiute and white traditions. It was held at the Paiute camp, with White Eagle officiating, but they also had readings from the Bible to honor Callista's parents. Samuel cried unashamedly as he walked his daughter to her new husband, and Calista stood beside him with tears streaming down her face. "Our little girl," Samuel whispered. "She will be happy," Calista assured him. "Running Fox is a good man. He will cherish her." Sarah and Running Fox built their home near the Paiute camp, and within 2 years they had given Samuel and Calista their first grandchild, a boy they named Silver Eagle in honor of Silver Fawn. Seth remained with his parents, content to live the mountain life and showing no interest in marriage yet. He had inherited his father's size and strength, standing over 6 feet tall by the time he was 17, and his mother's wisdom and tracking skills. Together, the three of them continued to live as they always had, in harmony with the land and each other. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Calista sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Their hair showed some gray now, and their faces had lines earned from years of laughter and hardship. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who had fallen in love all those years ago. "Do you remember when we first met?" Samuel asked, holding her hand. "You walked into Keeler like you owned the place, and everyone was terrified." "I was terrified too," Calista admitted, "but I could not show it. And then you appeared, this giant mountain man, and I felt safer than I had in years." "I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change," Samuel said. "I just didn't know how much. You gave me everything, Calista. A home, children, purpose. Before you, I was just existing. With you, I truly lived." "You gave me the same," Calista said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You saw past what everyone else feared. You saw me, the real me, and loved what you found." "How could I not?" Samuel murmured, kissing the top of her head. "You are the most extraordinary person I have ever known." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, the same stars that had watched over them for 20 years. In the distance they could hear Seth chopping wood, the rhythmic thunk of the axe a familiar sound. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called, and another answered. "Do you ever regret it?" Calista asked suddenly, "choosing this life away from civilization?" "Never," Samuel said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This is exactly where I was meant to be, with exactly who I was meant to be with. What about you? Any regrets?" Calista thought about the little girl sitting between her parents' graves, half dead from thirst and grief. She thought about Silver Fawn finding her, raising her, loving her. She thought about walking into Keeler that first time, terrified but determined. She thought about Samuel, stepping in to defend her, seeing her worth when others saw only difference. She thought about their wedding, their children, the life they had built together, the challenges they had faced and overcome, the love that had sustained them through everything. "No regrets," she said softly. "Only gratitude." Samuel pulled her closer, and they watched the night deepen around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new joys, but they would face it together, as they had faced everything for 20 years. In the end, Calista had found what she had been searching for without even knowing she searched. She had found acceptance, not from a town or a society, but from herself. She had found love that transcended boundaries of culture and expectation. She had found home, not in a place, but in a person. And Samuel had found his match, his equal, his partner in every sense. The woman who could keep up with him in the wilderness, challenge him intellectually, and love him with a fierce devotion that matched his own. They had proven that love could bridge any divide, that wisdom came in many forms, and that sometimes the people others feared were simply those they did not understand. Calista had been called savage, but she was the wisest person many would ever meet. And Samuel had seen that wisdom from the first moment, recognizing in her a kindred spirit. Years continued to pass, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren, new stories and old wisdom passed down through generations. The cabin by the lake remained standing, a testament to Samuel's craftsmanship and their enduring love. The Paiute tribe continued to thrive, with Sarah's children becoming leaders in their community. Seth eventually married a quiet woman from Keeler, surprising everyone, and they built their own cabin a mile from his parents. His wife, Emily, had initially been frightened of Calista, but quickly came to love and respect her mother-in-law, learning medicine and plant lore with eager enthusiasm. Samuel and Calista grew old together, their bodies aging but their spirits remaining young. They still took walks by the lake, still sat on the porch watching sunsets, still held hands like newlyweds. Their love was a legend in both the Paiute camp and in Keeler, a story told to illustrate that true love knows no boundaries. When they were in their 60s, a young reporter from Sacramento came to interview them, having heard stories about the white woman raised by natives who married a mountain man. He expected to find rough, uneducated people living primitive lives. Instead, he found two of the wisest, most articulate people he had ever met. "What would you say to people who think your way of life is savage?" the reporter asked Calista. She smiled, the same calm smile she'd given Henderson all those years ago. "I would say that savagery is not defined by how you live, but by how you treat others. I have seen more cruelty and violence in so-called civilized cities than I ever saw among the people who raised me. The Paiute taught me respect for all living things, harmony with nature, and the importance of community. If that is savage, then I gladly claim the title." "And you, Mr. Ironwood?" the reporter asked Samuel. "Do you ever regret leaving civilization behind?" Samuel laughed, the same deep rumble that had not changed in 40 years. "Young man, I didn't leave civilization behind. I left behind crowds and noise and people climbing over each other for money. Out here, I found real civilization, honor, loyalty, love, respect for the land. My wife is the most civilized person I know, and she was raised in a wickiup, not a mansion. That should tell you something about what civilization really means." The article, when published, caused quite a stir. Some people dismissed it as romanticizing a hard life, but others saw truth in the words. More importantly, it helped shift perceptions about native peoples and those who chose to live close to the land. Sarah's children grew and had children of their own, creating a large extended family that spanned both white and Paiute cultures. They were living proof that different worlds could not only coexist, but blend into something beautiful and strong. Seth and Emily had 3 daughters, all of whom inherited their grandmother's wisdom and their grandfather's strength. They grew up fluent in English and Paiute, comfortable in both Keeler and the tribal camps, embodying the bridge between worlds that Calista had always represented. When Samuel and Calista were 70, they took a trip back to Keeler one last time. The town had grown considerably, with a railroad station and electric lights on Main Street. Many of the old-timers who had feared or mocked Calista were long dead, but their children and grandchildren greeted her with respect and warmth. Mayor Porter, now ancient and using a cane, made a special trip to see them. "Mrs. Ironwood," he said, taking her hand gently, "you probably don't remember me, but I've never forgotten you. The day you stood up to Henderson, spoke with such dignity and wisdom, it changed something in this town. You helped us become better people." "I remember you well," Calista said warmly. "You spoke up when you did not have to. That took courage." "Nothing compared to yours," Porter said. "You and your husband, you showed us that love and respect matter more than where someone comes from or how they look. My granddaughter married a Paiute man last year, and they're very happy. 20 years ago, that never could have happened. But you helped change hearts and minds." After leaving Keeler, they rode slowly back to their cabin, taking their time to enjoy the journey. The mountains were as beautiful as ever, eternal and unchanging even as everything else shifted and evolved. "And do you think we made a difference?" Calista asked as they rode. "I think we lived our truth and let others decide what to make of it," Samuel said. "We showed people that love doesn't see color or culture, that wisdom comes in many forms, and that the best life is when lived with integrity. If that changed some minds, then good. If not, we still lived well and loved deeply. That's enough." "Yes," Calista agreed, leaning back against his chest as their horse walked steadily onward. "That is more than enough." They spent their final years in contentment, surrounded by family and the land they loved. Samuel remained strong almost to the end, chopping wood and hunting well into his 70s. Callista's mind stayed sharp, and she continued to make medicines and teach anyone who wanted to learn. On a crisp autumn morning, when Samuel was 73 and Calista 71, they sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The lake was mirror smooth, reflecting the mountains and the golden leaves of the aspens. "It's been a good life," Samuel said, his hand tight around hers. "The best life," Calista agreed. "I would not change a single moment." Not even the hard parts? Especially not the hard parts, she said firmly. They made us who we are. They made us strong enough to appreciate what we have. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, I love you, Calista Grey Ironwood. From the first moment I saw you to this moment right now, you have been my everything. And you have been mine, Calista whispered, tears gathering in her eyes, though she smiled. My protector, my partner, my love. You saw me when others looked away. You valued me when others feared. You loved me unconditionally and completely. That is the greatest gift anyone could receive. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, warming them with its golden light. Around them, the wilderness stretched in all directions, wild and free and beautiful. This was their kingdom, not bought or conquered, but earned through respect and understanding. Later that day, Seth came to visit with his wife and daughters. Sarah arrived with Running Fox and several of their grandchildren, the cabin filled with laughter and conversation, with children running and adults catching up on news. A feast was prepared, and they ate together as the extended family they had become. As the evening drew on and the family gradually departed, Samuel and Calista returned to their porch. The stars were beginning to appear, brilliant against the darkening sky. Thank you, Samuel said suddenly. For what? For saying yes all those years ago, for taking a chance on a rough mountain man, for building this life with me, for our children and grandchildren, for every moment of every day we've had together. Calista turned to look at him, seeing past the lined face and gray hair to the strong young man who had defended her in Keeler. I should thank you for the same reasons. You gave me a home when I belonged nowhere. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a family and a future. You were my refuge and my strength. They kissed, slow and sweet, a kiss that held 50 years of love and devotion. When they pulled apart, they simply held each other, two souls who had found their perfect match against all odds. The years rolled on, slower now, but still filled with joy. They celebrated as Seth's daughters married and started families of their own. They welcomed more great-grandchildren, each one a miracle. They watched seasons change and the world evolve, always together, always united. When Samuel finally passed away at 78, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Calista beside him. She woke to find him gone, and though grief pierced her heart like a blade, she also felt gratitude. They had been given so many years, so much love. Many people lived entire lives without experiencing a fraction of what they had shared. The funeral was attended by dozens of people from both Keeler and the Paiute camps. Seth spoke of his father's strength and integrity. Sarah spoke of his gentle kindness and unwavering love, but it was Calista who gave the final words. Samuel Ironwood was the best man I ever knew, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. He was strong enough to be gentle, confident enough to be humble, and wise enough to know that love matters more than anything else. He saw people for who they truly were, not what they looked like or where they came from. He defended the weak, respected the land, and loved his family with everything he had. The world is poorer for his loss, but richer for his having been in it. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the lake, with a simple wooden marker carved by Seth. The Paiute performed their traditional ceremonies, and the white friends from Keeler said prayers. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had bridged two worlds. Calista lived for 3 more years after Samuel's death. She remained in the cabin, refusing offers to move in with her children. This is where I belong, she said firmly, where we built our life together. I will stay here until it is my time to go. She spent her days teaching her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing on the wisdom Silver Fawn had given her and the lessons she had learned from a life fully lived. She taught them about plants and tracking, about respect and harmony, about choosing love over fear. On her final day, she called Seth and Sarah to her side. I am ready, she told them calmly. Do not mourn for me. I have lived more fully than most people dream of. I have loved and been loved. I have seen my children and grandchildren thrive. I am content. Mama, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face, we're not ready to lose you. You will never lose me, Calista said, taking her daughter's hand. I will be in every plant you harvest, every trail you follow, every sunset you watch. And I will be with your father again, which is where I most want to be. She passed away that night, quietly and without pain, a gentle smile on her face. They buried her next to Samuel so they could rest together as they had lived together. The legacy of Samuel and Calista Ironwood lived on through their descendants. The family remained close, maintaining connections to both white and Paiute communities. Their story was told and retold, inspiring others to look past differences and value wisdom wherever it was found. The cabin stood for many more years, maintained by Seth and eventually his daughters. It became a gathering place for the family, somewhere to remember the love that had started it all. Young couples would visit, hoping to find even a fraction of the love that Samuel and Calista had shared. In Keeler, a plaque was eventually placed commemorating Calista Ironwood, a woman who bridged two worlds with wisdom, courage, and grace. The Paiute people told stories of her to each new generation, honoring her as one of their own despite her white heritage. And on quiet nights in the mountains, when the wind whispered through the pines and the stars shone brilliantly overhead, people swore they could sometimes see two figures walking hand in hand by the lake. A large, powerful man with long hair and a woman who moved like water, together always, their love transcending even death. Their story proved that love knows no boundaries, that wisdom comes from understanding rather than education, and that the greatest legacy is not wealth or power, but the lives you touch and the love you leave behind. Samuel had seen past fear to recognize Callista's worth, and she had trusted him with her heart when trusting seemed impossible. Together, they had created something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the power of acceptance, respect, and unconditional love. They had shown that being raised differently did not make someone savage, but often made them wiser. They had proven that strength came not from domination, but from partnership, not from conquering, but from harmony. In the end, their life together was exactly what it should have been. A love story for the ages, set against the wild beauty of the untamed West, involving two souls who recognized each other as home. They had been fearless when they needed to be, gentle when circumstances allowed, and always, always devoted to each other and the life they had chosen. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love eternal. And that was the best ending anyone could hope for. A life fully lived in service to love, family, and the timeless wisdom of respecting all living things. Samuel and Calista Ironwood had shown the world what was possible when you chose to see with your heart rather than your eyes, when you valued wisdom over prejudice, and when you loved without reservation or condition. The mountains stood witness to their love story, eternal and unchanging, keeping watch over their final resting place and the family they had created. And in those mountains, their spirit lived on forever, a reminder that true love never dies and real wisdom never fades. They had lived, they had loved, and they had left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask from a life well lived?